1 Shemu'el chapter 17. And the Philistines had gathered their armies for battle and came together at Soko, which belongs to Yehudah, and encamped between Soko and Azekah and Aphes Damim. And Shaul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up a battle array to meet the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. And a bronze helmet was on his head, and he was armed with the scaled armor. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and bronze shin guards on his legs, and a bronze spear between his shoulders. And the wood of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and the shield bearer went before him. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Israel, and said to them, Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight me, and shall strike me, then we shall be your servants. But if I overcome him and shall strike him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Then the Philistines said, This day I shall reproach the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight together. And Shaul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, and they were broken down and in great fear. Now Dawid was the son of that Ephratite of Bethlehem in Yehudah, whose name was Yeshai. And he had 8 sons. And in the days of Shaul, the man was old among men. And the 3 oldest sons of Yeshai went, and they had gone to follow Shaul to the battle. And the names of the 3 sons who went to the battles were Eliab, the firstborn, and his second, Abinadab, and the third, Shema. And Dawid was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Shaul. But Dawid went and returned from Shaul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Philistine drew near, morning and evening, and took his stand. Then Yeshai said to his son Dawid, Please take to your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp. And take these 10 cheeses to the commander of the 1,000, and see how your brothers are, and bring back news of them. For Shaul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And Dawid rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the herdsmen, and took and went as Yeshai had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight, and they shouted for the battle. And Israel and the Philistines drew up a battle array, army against army. And Dawid left his supplies in the hand of the keeper of the supplies, and ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. And he was speaking with them, and saw the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath, by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and spoke according to the same words. And Dawid heard, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, ran from him, and were in great fear. And the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who has come up? For he has come up to reproach Israel. And it shall be that the man who strikes him, the sovereign is going to enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption in Israel. And Dawid spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, What shall be done for the man who strikes this Philistine, and shall take away reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he reproached the armies of the living Yah? And the people answered him according to his word, saying, This is what is done for the man who strikes him. And Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's displeasure burned against Dawid, and he said, Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And Dawid said, Now what have I done? Was it not but a word? And he turned around from him toward another, and said the same word. And these people answered him a word like the first word. And when the words which Dawid spoke were heard, they reported them to Shaul, and he sent for him. And Dawid said to Shaul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant is going, and shall fight with this Philistine. And Shaul said to Dawid, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of battle from his youth." Then Dawid said to Shaul, "Your servant has been tending sheep for his father, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and rescued it from its mouth. And when it rose against me, I took hold of it by its beard and struck it and killed it. And your servant has stricken both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, seeing he has reproached the armies of the living Yah." And Dawid said, "Yah, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he does deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." And Shaul said to Dawid, "Go, and Yah be with you." And Shaul dressed Dawid with his garments, and he put a bronze helmet on his head, and put a coat of armor on him. But Dawid girded his sword over his garments, and began to go, but he had not tried them. Then Dawid said to Shaul, "I am not able to go with these, for I have not tried them." So Dawid took them off. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the wadi, and put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came and began drawing near to Dawid, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw Dawid, he despised him, for he was a youth and ruddy and of handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to Dawid, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed Dawid by his mighty ones. And the Philistine said to Dawid, "Come to me, and I give your flesh to the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field." But Dawid said to the Philistine, "You come to me with the sword and with the spear and with the javelin. But I come to you in the name of Yah of hosts, the power of the armies of Israel, whom you have reproached. This day Yah shall deliver you into my hand, and I shall strike you and take your head from you, and give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines today to the birds of the heavens and the wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth know that Yah is for Israel. And all this assembly know that Yah does not save with sword and spear, for the battle belongs to Yah, and he shall give you into our hands." And it came to be, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet Dawid, that Dawid hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And Dawid put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Thus Dawid was stronger than the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. And there was no sword in the hand of Dawid. Then Dawid ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Yehudah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley, and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the way to Sha'ayarim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. And the children of Israel turned back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camps. And Dawid took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put his weapons in his tent. And when Shaul saw Dawid going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this youth?" And Abner said, "As your being lives, O sovereign, I do not know." And the sovereign said, "Ask whose son this young man is." And when Dawid returned from the striking of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Shaul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Shaul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And Dawid said, "The son of your servant Yeshai, the Bethlehemite."